Welcome to Art for All Ages Online. Today we're pulling out all the stops for this wonderful painting today. It is painting number 4. It is the Half Flower. It is a wonderful painting. It has been a hit everywhere we go with various artists, and we're going to show you how to do it one step at a time, as always today. But let's take a look and we'll show you what it's all about. So this is today's painting. It is called the Half Flower, and it will require a wide range of different items from your kit in order to do today's painting. Here also is a slight variation of the same painting. Here again is another slight variation of today's painting. We'll talk about the variations and talk with you about how you can do some of those if you choose to. Today's painting will require that you utilize stencil number 4. Today's painting will also require that you utilize one of your drafting dots from your supply kit. If you do not yet have all of these supplies in order to accomplish today's painting, our suggestion is that you go on to our supply list on the website and purchase those items which you need so that you will be able to complete today's painting. Today's painting is the Half Flower, and we will be utilizing stencil number 4. It is required for today's painting, and I really have to say I don't think you can do it without the stencil. There are some paintings you might be able to do without our stencil. I don't think this is going to be one of them. We will utilize the stencil in this manner, or if you want, in this manner, or if you want, in this manner, or if you want, in this manner. You may position the flower however you see fit based upon what you would like for your painting. I have done this painting many times before. This happens to be my most favorite position for today's painting. We will also utilize a few little pieces of tape from our kit to hold down the stencil in place. It is best that when you do this, that you put it so that the tape is on the other section where the tape is. Make sure you don't put the tape on the area where the painting is going to be done. Today's painting can be done 100% with nothing more than our good old friend the sponge. If you do decide you want to do a little brushwork, that's your prerogative, but you don't need it. This is one of the beautiful things about utilizing the stencils, because these stencils make it so that the whole painting can be done with nothing more than this little sponge. Now there is a little bit of a catch, and we want to talk with you about it. We talk normally about this as being the number 1 motion back and forth, nice and simple. Today's painting is mostly that. You can do it with the number 1 motion as long as you keep turning your painting like a steering wheel. Much easier. Simply raise your hand and pull down. Raise your hand and pull down. Same thing, go into the corner of your painting and pull across diagonally. Over here now, in the corner, over up here, and you pull down diagonally. So that kind of a motion will help us to create what we're looking for today's painting. And we'll show you what we're talking about. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use the brush simply to mix the color. What we're looking for is a bright emerald green color. You will also notice that you cannot mix enough of this paint. Chances are very, very high that when you go to do this painting yourself, you will run out of that green paint and you will need to mix up more. It's not a problem if that does end up happening. All you have to do is put the sponge down, go back to the brush to mix up some more of that same green paint, and then go back to the sponge to carry on with what we were talking about. Now, for today's painting, even though I said what we were going to do was we would put the sponge in the corner and pull down, it actually works much easier if you turn the painting upside down to do the same thing. What we're looking for What we're looking for is this radiating pattern that goes through today's painting for the background. The stencil will protect all of the sections of the white of the paper, so we have that beautiful white flower to be seen. What we're going to be creating now is just the green background. This darker color here around the outset, we'll add that later on at the painting. When we utilize stencils and sponges, the most important rule is the sponge is squeezed and mostly dry. If your sponge is too wet, it will bleed underneath the stencil, and that will obviously create a problem, and you will not create a clean line, but you'll have a bleed through, which we obviously want to avoid. What we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and put the color onto the sponge. We're going to place the sponge onto the stencil, not on the edge over here on the paper, but actually on the stencil. You do not need to start all the way down here. Just make sure that you start on the edge of where the stencil is, but your sponge is actually on the blue of the stencil, and you're going to pull down. You're going to do the same thing over here on the edge of the stencil and pull to the corner. One more time, this part of the flower on the stencil and pull to the other corner. You can now see how we have this radiating motion. That's what we're looking for. You will continue to create that same radiating motion all the way around the painting. When you get to this side, obviously you're going horizontally because we're looking at it as if it's kind of like a sunburst. And that's the feel that we're trying to achieve by utilizing this direction with the sponge. Now, if you just want to go completely pulling down, if that's what your desire is, that's perfectly fine. But if you're able to get this radiating pattern that goes around the outside of the painting, it will help to create some more dimension and dynamic aspects of today's painting. Now, once we have completed that, that's it. We do not need the stencil anymore. We'll go ahead and we will very carefully turn the painting around to the right side way up. And we're going to very carefully remove the stencil. And voila! You can see now that we have the beautiful negative space of the white flower for our painting today. When you go to remove tape off of your stencils, please be careful. If you're not careful, you might accidentally rip the stencil, and we would not want to do that. One other thing. When you're finished using your stencil, use the back side of your sponge to clean off the edge of the stencil so that the paint is removed. Then use a towel of some kind to dry off the stencil and return it to your kit so that you may use it again for another painting next time. Now that we have removed the stencil and we have the flower shape in place, what we want to do now is we want to save this one section of the painting to remain white. In order to do that, we will utilize one of our drafting dots to be positioned in that place so we can paint over it without painting on that section. I have one of the drafting dots off the roll now, and I'll very carefully pull it off the paper. And when I position this, I want to be approximately in the middle here of the flower. The other thing is, if you look closely at the painting, you'll notice the circle goes off the page. In order to create that, what we want to do is we want to be able to have some of the dot on the yellow tape. So I'll go ahead and I'll position that here, approximately in the middle of the flower. And I'll go ahead and push it down. It should feel like sandpaper. And you may or may not be able to see the dot now, but as we continue to paint on the painting today, you will notice this dot. And you will notice that part of it is actually on this yellow tape, and it extends into the flower. It is at this point of today's painting that we want to be able to think about that dot that's in the middle of the painting of the flower. That dot that's in the middle of the flower becomes our focal point. It becomes the focal point for almost everything else in today's painting. From this point on, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be placing the sponge directly to the dot, and we will move horizontally to one side, on the dot, and horizontally to the next side. Now watch what I'm going to do. After I have done that, I will take the sponge and I will turn my wrist, and I will put the sponge on the dot and I will pull straight up. And what we're looking to create there is like a plus sign or a cross. That's what we're looking for, and that will give us the first start. And once we've done that, then we will radiate outwards just as we did with the other green color, but we're going to find that it is still inside the confines of the white outline of the flower. We'll show you what we're talking about. Today's color for the starting of the painting can be done in various ways. And I want to make sure that I'm clear about explaining this color. One way is simply to utilize the Payne's gray. If you mix it up very soft and light, that will work. Another way that it works is if you use a color called Davy's gray. If you do not have Davy's gray, you may use the Payne's gray. Also, you'll notice that my palette has a little bit of magenta color here left over from my previous painting. If I didn't have that, I would be adding that magenta to the Davy's gray. Now, if you do not have the Davy's gray and you're trying to mix this color, another way that you can mix it is to mix up the magenta and the emerald green. It sounds strange, but those two will give you this soft gray kind of a color. If you find that the gray that you're mixing up is not quite dark enough, because the Davy's gray does take some elbow grease to get it going, you may want to add just a little tiny touch of the Payne's gray to your color anyway. What we're looking for is a soft pinky gray color. And as we described a few minutes ago, we're going to utilize the sponge with that radiating pattern, and we'll show you how it works. I have the color now onto my sponge. I go and I position where the dot on the painting is located. I'll put the sponge on the dot, and I want to move horizontally one direction. On the dot, horizontally in the opposite direction. Now you'll notice that I did not extend this out to where the green of the painting is, and we want to continue to keep that area of this part of the flower to be white. Now I'll put the sponge, I'll turn my wrist, I'll put the sponge on the dot, and I will go straight up. Now once we have the basic plus or the cross sign, at this point we want to continue to radiate outwards from the dot. This is what we're trying to create, is that sunburst. You can absolutely see that there is a sense of this sunburst that is occurring with today's flower that radiates from the part where this dot is located. A very common mistake is that people will take the sponge here on the tape line and they will radiate upwards from the tape line. And that is a wrong direction that we don't want to have. We want to make sure that the sponge always starts on the dot and radiates outwards from the dot. If you want your color a little softer, wet the tip of your sponge, leave a little bit of moisture on there, and you can come back now and you can softly blend in some of that radiating feel. We do not want this part of the painting to be super dark. We want it soft and light. You will also notice that I am very careful. I still left the white of the flower for the painting. I do not want to radiate any of these colors into the green area of the flower. And you can choose to radiate out as much or as little as you like. And that looks good. We'll go ahead and clean out our sponge and move on to the next part of the painting. What we did, we're going to do the exact same thing all over again. It's going to be like deja vu. But there is a little bit of a catch. We're going to change two basic things. Very simple. Number one, we're going to change the color. And number two, we're going to change how far out we radiate it. And here's the catch. If we continue to use that dot as the focal point of today's painting, we radiate it out this much for the light gray. The next color only gets radiated out this much. And then the next color only gets radiated out this much until we finally get close to where we're on the dot with just a little darkness wrapped around the edge of that circle. We'll show you what we're talking about. So what we want to do now is we want to go ahead and do the same thing with a new color. This time what we're going to use is just the plain magenta by itself. You can mix it right on top of where you mixed your other gray color. That would be perfectly fine. You will not need as much of this color as you did the other color. We'll clean out our brush and utilize our sponge. It is important that this part of the painting where you have been working has had a moment to dry before you go and put the second color onto the painting. Also, as I mentioned a moment ago, we will start on the dot, but we will not go out as far as we went out the first time with the gray color. This time we only want to go out a little bit. So even as we bring it out only a little bit, you're still going to be able to see some of the gray on the outside. Let me show you what we're talking about. When we look at the painting, we can see the magenta color is there, but look, we can still see the outside ring of the original gray color that we added the first time. So now I'm going to utilize the sponge with the same magenta color. On the dot, we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to just softly go to one direction, softly go to the next direction. Turn the sponge and then go softly upwards. You will notice again, I started with the plus sign and I also have not eliminated all of the gray. I'll continue to repeat that process, radiating out from the dot. If you have to turn your angle of attack, if you have to turn the sponge on an angle to get less of the sponge, that's perfectly fine. I'm just using a little tiny corner of the sponge in order to create this. I'm not using the full flat edge of the sponge. Now once that has been started and you have a feel for that, we can clean out the sponge and go back in very softly. Oh, look at this. This now allows us to radiate this out very softly to create all kinds of soft pink areas within that part of the flower. Now that I have this a little softer, I can go out a little bit further than I did the first time. You will also notice every time I started with the sponge on the dot and radiated outwards accordingly. That's looking good. We'll clean out our sponge and move on to the next part of the painting. You may begin to notice that my painting today is a softer, lighter shade of color than the original sample that we used. That's fine. That's my prerogative. It's your painting. You may choose to make it darker. You may choose to make it lighter. It is your painting and you may paint it as you see fit. What we're going to do now is the exact same thing with a much darker color. And instead of radiating out like this or this, we're going to be right on top of that dot. We'll show you what we're talking about. This time what we want to utilize is the Payne's Gray. We'll use the brush to mix up a nice batch of this Payne's Gray. In fact, because we're going to be using this in a few minutes anyway for another part of the painting, it doesn't matter. You can mix up a whole bunch of this. But we're only going to need a little bit for this first part of the painting. We'll clean out our brush and pick up our sponge. There are two ways to do what we're about to describe to you. The first way, which is the easiest, is to simply put the color onto the sponge and very carefully pat around the outside edge of the dot. Or if you have the dexterity, you may continue to utilize the same motion that we did originally, which is putting the sponge on the dot and slowly pulling away onto the outside. What you're trying to create is the vision of when you see the eclipse of a sun and you can only see the corona on the outside of the sun. That's the kind of feel that we're looking for. I have the color and I'll show you what I'm talking about. If I just simply pat onto the dot, but just a little bit of the color is going to the outside of the circle, that's one way to achieve what we're talking about. And you may continue that process. Or if you want, you may also softly stroke it outwards, like we have been already doing with other parts of today's painting. We don't want to go anywhere near out here. We don't even want to go all the way out here where the pink is. We want it very, very close, right next to the edge of where the dot is. Again, think of an eclipse of the sun, and you just see the corona on the outside edge. Same thing, you can wet the tip of the sponge, squeeze it out, dry it off a little bit, and very softly you can come back in and highlight out some of those areas. Again, I'm making today's painting a little softer than the original, but you can make your painting as dark or as light as you like. And in fact, once you have done this, if you have made it too light, you can go back in and give yourself a little extra punch around the outside edge of the dot again, just by patting in a little bit darker into that area. Because we do want it dark right there by the dot. That will help us that when we remove the dot, we'll be able to see what's going on much clearer. And you can work on this as much or as little as you want. Okay, we're going to move on to the next part of today's painting. This is a little tricky. It's not difficult, but it is a little tricky. We're going to add a dark layer around the outside edge of today's painting. Now, in order to create this, we're going to use the same color that we just used, the Payne's Gray. The catch is you want to utilize that motion called the lift. Again, it's a finesse move and it's called the lift. And the lift means that as you're dragging the sponge across the page, you are slowly lifting off the page like a plane taking off the runway. We'll show you what this looks like and some things to avoid along the way. What we want to do now is, since I've run out of that Payne's Gray, I'll use the brush to mix up a little bit more. We do want this particular paint to be on the dark side for this part of the painting today. What we're trying to achieve is this darker color around the outside edge of the painting for today. You will notice that it tapers and feathers off, and that's what the lift does to create that softness. Now, when you do this, what ends up happening is you want to make sure, most of all, that you are nowhere near the white edge of the flower. We want to maintain the crisp edge of that, and that's why the lift allows you to pull in but not get paint into the flower itself. So this is what we're talking about. I have the color on my sponge, and as you can see, this radiating pattern that continues with the painting, we would like to do the same thing. In fact, if you want, you could turn the painting around if you found that easier. I'm going to go ahead and keep it in this direction because I think that'll work for me just fine. But if you are uncomfortable with the lift in one direction or another, feel free to turn the painting around. Now you'll notice I started in this corner and I pulled as if I was coming to the dot. Remember, the dot is the focal point of today's painting. Now I'll be in this corner and I'll pull again to the edge of the dot. I'm continuing to utilize the lift so I have that feathered, tapered feel. When I come towards the middle section, I want to make sure that I'm pulling almost straight down, and especially in the very middle, like a widow's peak, straight down in the middle. You can add as much and or as little of this dark color as you want for the outside edge of your painting. It is a very personal and optional thing that you can do. If you push too hard on your painting when you are adding this color, you will actually end up lifting the color. If that ends up happening, the best thing to do is let it dry and then to come back in darker and add in another color. But we're going to do some other things there anyway, so it'll be fine. Okay, we'll clean out our sponge and move on to the next part of today's painting. And now we get to remove the dot. We got to get our dot off because this is a very wonderful part of today's painting, because now that we're finished with the painting in that section, what we find is that the dot removed will reveal a perfect circle for the inset of our flower. We'll show you what we're talking about. It is very important, two things: that your hands are dry, your painting is dry, and that you have no paint on your fingers. Very carefully begin to remove with your fingernail the dot from your painting, starting on the area where the yellow tape is. If by the time you get to the area where the dot is being removed and it's starting to rip, use your fingernail on the opposite side of the dot to begin to remove it from that direction to minimize what possible ripping you might have of your painting. There we are. The dot is removed and we have a perfect circle. I'll rub this down just a little bit just in case to make sure that that has a nice seal. When you remove the dot, because it was on the yellow tape, it may have pulled off a little edge of that tape, and we want to make sure it's nice and down. Now what we want to do is move on to work onto this part of our painting. And now we're going to get loaded. One of my favorite things to do. No, this is a G-rated program. It has nothing to do with alcohol at all. But we're going to load our sponge. It's an old term that usually refers to loading the brush. We're actually going to do both. We'll show you what it's all about. At this stage of the painting, we are going to, as I said, load the sponge with a special color. If you find that this painting water that you have utilized has become too dark, you may need to get a fresh bucket of water in order to create a pure, clean yellow. If you're able to get the yellow out of what water you have, that's fine. We're going to utilize the brush and roll it into that bright cadmium yellow, Then we're going to take the brush filled with that paint and paint the tip of the sponge. We'll put the brush down and we'll take the sponge, bang, right into the yellow. Now, very carefully, we want to softly pat this white circle and make it yellow. The catch here is you want to start on the inside and slowly work your way to the outside. Once you start hitting some parts of the outside, well, that's fine. Pollen goes everywhere in a flower. But if your sponge becomes too muddy, when you go back into the inset, you might make it all muddy and gray, and we don't want to do that. That's why we want to start on the inside first and work our way slowly to the outside. Technically, you could do this with a brush, but it doesn't give you the same texture. And there we are. Now, one of the other things that I'm going to do with that same yellow that we have on the sponge now is I'm going to come to the outside area beyond the magenta, and I'm going to pat in a very specific pattern, and this is important to watch. When I start, I will pat here and notice how the sponge is horizontal to the painting. That's the way I want it. When I'm over on this side, it's also flat, horizontal to the painting. But as I continue to move around the painting, notice I'm going to change the angle of attack for the sponge so that it gets that same straight pattern, again radiating around the flower. We're still on the outside area where the magenta is finished, and we're going to add just a little hint of that yellow there. If you like also, with just a little water, you can also add a little hint of the yellow into your sky in the background. That's an optional touch and it's not required, but it is a nice touch occasionally on your painting. We'll clean out our sponge and move on to the next part of today's painting. Now we come to a part of the painting that we call the accent color. It's a color that we have not used in our painting yet today, and it is just a little dab, a little touch, a little here, a little there, and basically less is more. You don't want to overdo this, but a little bit really makes the painting sing. So let's show you what that's all about. We're going to again use the brush to just simply mix up the color of the paint. Today's color for this section is going to be the alizarin crimson. You can mix it where you mixed your magenta color, and the two of them together will be fine. But we mostly want that cherry red color. That's what we're looking for. Now that we have that color in our palette, what we want to do is we want to use the sponge. We're going to do two things with this alizarin crimson color. Number one, we're going to pat a very small amount here into this yellow section. Now when we do this, mostly it's going to be here on the taped edge of the painting, and just a little hint of it goes into the painting itself. We don't want to make that yellow dot red, but notice a very soft patting. Now I'm going to turn the sponge to the butt end, and I'm going to soften it by patting a little there, and that's looking good. If we want a little bit more, we can add a little bit more, but you don't want to overdo it. You want to keep it soft. The other thing is, where we added that yellow here around this outside edge, a little patting of this alizarin crimson mixed in with that yellow that's already there in the same rotating pattern will add some lovely texture to that part of the painting. You can add some on the inner set also if you feel the need to do so. And that's all we want for that part of the painting, is just to add a little of that color. And that's it. Now for some of you, for many of you, you're going to be done. That's all there is to it. Remove the tape and look at the beautiful painting that you've made. Maybe there's something else that some people may or may not want to do with today's painting. It's an extra step. It's not difficult at all, but it adds a different dimension to your painting, and it is a technique that is simply water. Let me show you what we're talking about. This is our basic painting that we talked about. We'll show ours without the tape in just a minute. An alternate option is this, and you will notice all of this splotchiness that goes around the outside of the painting. It's an optional thing, and you may choose to not do this. That's your prerogative. You may also choose to return the stencil onto the painting in order to accomplish this, so that you don't accidentally hit the area of the white flower. But if you're careful, you can do this without hitting the white flower, and it's not a problem. We'll show you how that's done. What we're going to do is we're going to take the painting and we're going to turn it upside down. We're going to utilize our brush, and as I mentioned, just simply water. Even if it's the dirty water, it will be fine. We're going to hold our finger at a 45-degree angle that's parallel to the painting. And here with a 45-degree angle here, we're going to flick droplets of the water from the brush onto various parts of the painting. Again, this is an optional thing and you do not have to do this, but if you want, this is how it is done. And as we continue to softly flick little droplets of water, we want to let those droplets of water settle into the painting for just a few minutes. Not too long that they actually dry, but long enough that they begin to have a reaction into the paint that has already been placed onto the painting. Some of your drops may be large, some of them may be small. It depends upon how you would like to put those drops on your painting. Once you have achieved that flicking of the water onto the painting, the next part is very simple. We come back with the sponge with no paint and we very softly pat where the water droplets have been placed onto the painting. And you will begin to notice, look at this. A whole new world of texture begins to appear on today's painting because of that. You may also continue to repeat this process over and over again and add all kinds of new interesting textures to the background of your painting. If you find that you did not like that, you can always go back and bring in the darker color again and to remove most of those water droplets as you saw in the beginning. At this point, we'll take the tape off and show everybody what we've done. Now that our painting has dried and we have removed the tape, you can see the beautiful painting that is revealed. And you can also see that there is a nice texture that was created from the water droplets for today's painting. One other note that we have not discussed as of yet: we very rarely use a pencil for anything other than to sign our name at the bottom. But you will notice that because of the way this was created, the white of the paper flows into the white of the flower. And if you choose to leave it like that, that is perfectly fine. If you would like instead to create some kind of a pencil line that fills in that area where the white is so that there's a clear definition for the border, you may utilize your T-square and a pencil in your kit, and that will allow you to create those lines. Here is the original, and here is the final finished product. This is painting number 4, which is the half flower. We hope you enjoy it. Lots of things to learn here, lots of things to see, new elements. We used a stencil, we used a dot, we used droplets of water onto the painting. This came out really cool, and you can utilize all these kinds of techniques in future paintings as well. We hope that you've enjoyed today's class and that your painting came out just as good as ours. We hope to see you again next time with Art for All Ages. Thank you.